Are you kidding me? There's a Rampage movie now, with The Rock in it? Actually, that does sound kind of amazing. Video game movies already have a bad reputation, but of all series to make a movie out of, why pick Rampage? Rampage was never this huge thing. I mean, a couple of them did well enough, but it's not a household name, you know? Is anyone genuinely excited by this? And I mean, unironically. Like, actually excited by the idea of a Rampage movie, and not just The Rock being in a monster movie. Not a lot of people even like these games, and even Rampage fans probably stopped caring years ago. I know I did. Maybe it'll be good. And now that I think about it, perhaps it's good that they took an obscure series like Rampage to make a movie out of, since not a lot of people would be upset by the changes to the lore, that deep Rampage lore. It'll probably be a fun monster movie. I'm just a bit baffled that it even exists. I never would have guessed a series like Rampage would get a movie, especially when it hasn't been relevant for years. But hey, it's still a better idea than a Tetris trilogy, and I get an excuse to play the games. I've only played 3 of them before this video and only liked 1 of them. But I have acquired the other 2 games, so I might as well cover them in anticipation for the movie. This is the Rampage Retrospective. Let's begin.
In the red corner!
I'm not going to talk much about the original Rampage, since there really isn't much to say. It was an arcade game that came out in '86, but I had the NES version, and, well, what you see is what you get. So, being an NES game, there's not really any story at all. Not even the manual gives one. But the idea is you are one of 2 giant monsters, George the Gorilla and Lizzie the Lizard. I wonder what they're based off of. And you get to destroy cities. The premise is pretty cool. Not too many games where you get to be a giant monster and just wreck everything, especially back then. I mean, there are plenty of Godzilla games, but that's about all I can think of. But the problem is, it's so boring. Yeah, it's an NES game, and I'll admit I never really liked NES games. But I at least can get enjoyment out of something like Mario 3. There's just not much here. So basically, each level there's a set of buildings you must destroy. To destroy them, you climb them and punch holes into them until they eventually collapse. Punching holes can reveal items to restore health, and you can even eat people to restore health. Enemies include people shooting at you and throwing dynamite. There's also vehicles like helicopters and tanks. You're also not very mobile. I know you're a giant monster, but can you pick up the pace a bit? And yeah, that's about it. There really isn't much to say. Each level is just doing the same thing with a different layout. It's pretty repetitive. Now, people tend to always consider repetition to be a bad thing, but a game being repetitive doesn't automatically make it bad. The Dynasty Warrior games are pretty repetitive, but they're still fun. A repetitive action can be fun if it's satisfying, and one thing that can make a repetitive action satisfying is how it looks and sounds. One of the reasons it's fun to mow down groups of enemies is because it's visually and audibly satisfying. There's more to it than just that, but visual effects as well as sound effects actually go a long way in making something that is boring, fun and satisfying. Destroying buildings in Rampage is not visually or audibly satisfying, so it's boring to play. People like to say visuals and sounds don't matter in a game, and while to an extent I agree, you try playing a game without sound and everything is just a featureless box. Sounds pretty boring, doesn't it? Now apply that to your favorite game. I doubt it would stay your favorite game even if the gameplay was untouched. I know it's an NES game, so you can't expect that much. And I'm sure back then, when there really wasn't anything else like it, it was fun. But even as a kid, I thought it was boring. Okay, that's enough of NES Rampage. It's boring, nothing else to it. Might as well try the arcade version. Well, it's not much better. All that's really different is the graphics. There's also a third monster in this version, Ralph the Wolf. Although unless I'm missing something, it seems you can only pick George, unless you're playing with more people. So, yeah, it's still pretty boring. And there isn't even any music. The music in the NES version is horribly unfitting, but at least it had music. There's also more enemies, and since you're still not very mobile, you can imagine how tough it can be to avoid projectiles. This was an arcade game after all. Gotta squeeze as many quarters out of players as possible. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm not a fan of original Rampage. It has a good concept, but only has the bare minimum when it comes to the actual gameplay. Like I said, I can imagine this being fun back when there wasn't anything like it, but it has been outdone. An example being the next game in the series. So Rampage wouldn't get a sequel for 11 years, completely skipping the 4th generation. And in '97, we got Rampage World Tour, also an arcade game, but was ported to like everything. I'll be covering the N64 version, which actually came out in '98. So this is the first time I've played this game, and from the sounds of it, this is the game most people consider to be the best, probably because it's the only one people really even played. I actually didn't know this game existed for the longest time, but I'll get into that with the next game. World Tour is practically a reboot. Not like the previous game had a story to begin with, and this one doesn't have much of one either. So there's a company called Scum Labs, and with a name like that, you know nothing bad will ever come out of them. According to the manual, Scum Labs is a toxic waste recycler, and an explosion caused 3 employees to transform into giant monsters. The very same ones from the previous game: George, Lizzie, and Ralph. I'm mostly going to be playing as Lizzie for this. You can also change their color, which I didn't find out about until after I had already got all the footage I needed. Whoops. If I knew I could make Ralph red, I would have played as him the entire time. The goal of the 3 monsters is to wipe Scum Labs off the face of the earth, and that's what they do. They travel the globe in a really strange order and destroy any building in their way. In between levels, we see this girl who has some really big glasses. Her name is Dr. Betty Veronica. She is also a Scum Labs scientist, and she has some dialogue, but it doesn't really matter. Also, every time you destroy a Scum Labs building, you get a scene with the CEO of Scum Labs, Eustace D. Monick. I'm not kidding, that's his name. So yeah, that's the plot. Nothing special, but appropriate for this kind of game. There's also been an art style change. It's more cartoonish and colorful, which is good, but something about how it looks bothers me. I don't know, it looks a bit too goofy for me, and it's not bad, but I'm not a fan. The music is alright, nothing really too memorable, but good while you're playing. Okay, now for the gameplay, and the basic idea is still the same. You're a giant monster smashing cities, but it's greatly improved. Remember all that stuff at the beginning I mentioned about visuals and sound effects can make a repetitive action fun? While I'm not too big on the art style, it still is much more visually and audibly satisfying to destroy buildings. This is what I mean. I'm more inclined to want to do this for a few hours than this. Each level is a set of buildings you need to destroy like the previous game, but the areas are bigger and not just on a single screen. The monsters themselves have also been upgraded. Besides the standard moveset of climb and punch, you can now kick by pushing down C. On the ground you can kick people, but that's about it. You can also jump kick, but it's tough to hit anything with it. Anyways, the kick can be used on buildings to destroy an entire floor. But now, when on top of a building, you can damage the building by punching down. This is the most efficient way of destroying buildings, and it's annoying going back to the first game where you can't do that. But also on top of the building, you can stomp down on it by holding down and jumping to just flatten it. With all this, destroying buildings is more than just punching holes on the side of it until it collapses. You could still do that, but now you have more options, which helps make it feel less repetitive. The monsters also just control better. They're much more mobile, and by repeatedly tapping the jump button, you can flap your arms to get more airtime. Punching holes in buildings still reveals items you can eat to regain health, or throw up. Each monster has a specific food item that gives them mega health. There are now these windows which always have something behind them. Most of the time, if it's not health, it's something pointless like furniture you can punch out of the building. But sometimes you can find a bomb that destroys the building, or you set an entire building on fire. You can also sometimes find power-ups in buildings, but they're few and far between. The coolest part is if you find some purple toxic waste on the ground and eat it, you turn into the Violent, Enraged, and Radioactive Nemesis, or Vern for short. While like this, you can fly and very easily destroy buildings. This power-up only appears in levels with Scum Lab buildings, and it's only for that level. It can be annoying if you get it when most of the buildings are already destroyed, or like in this case when I got it as the last building was collapsing, but it's still fun to use. Now there are quite a few enemy types you have to deal with, and they throw a lot at you. It's rare when you have nothing attacking. And some of the enemies can be rather annoying, like the guys with jetpacks who set you on fire and take a few hits to kill. And the tanks are a pain since they knock you over and usually hit you again when you get back up, although if you jump on them you can ride them and damage buildings. And then there's Ed 209? What are you doing here? Anyways, Ed can also set you on fire and takes quite a few punches. And what's even worse are the upgraded versions that punch you, sending you way back. It's better to ignore them most of the time. These planes can also be annoying, but like the tanks, if you jump on them, you can ride them. They're more effective at destroying buildings too. But yeah, you have a lot to deal with. Even the basic helicopters can drain your health fast. You're gonna die a lot. This was originally an arcade game after all. It was meant to eat quarters. So this game must be pretty hard, right? Well, actually no, because death has no meaning. You shrink and turn back to a human, but a push of the start button brings you right back. So even with how many times you're gonna die, it's just a minor annoyance. Some of these enemies are pretty annoying, but it doesn't really matter. They're not gonna stop you. Normally I would complain about the lack of challenge, but this isn't the kind of game I would turn to for a challenge. This is more of a stress reliever game. You turn it on to smash stuff and relax. Not every game needs to be super challenging, although I do think it could do with more of a challenge. Maybe change the enemies around so it's less like you can't avoid damage. Boost your health, but if you die, you restart the city. But then again, most of the cities don't take long at all to destroy, so it wouldn't do much. The point is, don't go into this game expecting a challenge, because you will certainly be disappointed. So yeah, there's not much else to say, really. You destroy cities for a while. Sometimes you find a flag that if you hit, changes to a different flag, and the one it stays on is the next place you'll visit after this minigame. The route you take is convoluted. You just travel entire continents between levels. Like seriously guys, pick one and stay there until you're done smashing it. And the buildings, vehicles, and people stay the same no matter what part of the world you're on. There are about 130 levels in the game, and there aren't any bosses or anything. Well, near the very end, this appears. The hell is that? Apparently, that is Eustace. I guess he got tired of you wrecking his stuff and mutated himself. You can't beat him, he's just there to get in the way, and he explodes when you complete the area, but just comes back anyway. Eventually, you get to the moon, where Scum Labs has a moon base. Why does a toxic waste recycling company have a moon base? Who funded this? Whatever, you destroy that, and then Veronica, who is the last living Scum Labs employee left, shrinks the monsters, but they get on the ship. And that's where it ends. Although in the PlayStation version, this happens.
Oh my.
I wonder who might have wanted to censor that for the N64 version. But yeah, that's Rampage World Tour. Not much to say, really. It's simple and repetitive, but fun as long as you have the right mindset. But yeah, on to the next game. The next Rampage game came out 1 year later, and it would be the first that wasn't made for arcades. That's right, it's now console exclusive, and it's also a direct sequel to World Tour. It's Rampage 2 Universal Tour. This is the game I had growing up. For the longest time, I didn't even know about World Tour, so I thought this was a sequel to the NES game. But let's get into it. Once again, I have the N64 version, but it's also on PlayStation and Game Boy Color for some reason. That version makes me sad. But between the N64 and PlayStation versions, there isn't much of a difference. But one difference is the intro cutscene. The N64 version is just an image with text, which I actually like more since it's not as long or annoying, and there's music during it. In the PlayStation version, there's this FMV of a news reporter. The cutscene is kind of annoying in its attempts to be funny, but it could be worse. Oh, it could be so much worse. Basically, the world has finished rebuilding after the events of World Tour. That was fast. And the 3 monsters from the game have been put in cages in different parts of the world. So, a few things. They were shrunk in the last game, but they're huge again here. You'd think they'd be easy to kill if they kept them small, or did that wear out? But also, they placed George in New York City, Lizzie in Tokyo, and Ralph in London. Of all places, why there where they could cause the most amount of damage if they escaped? Whatever, so continuing with the cutscene, apparently Scum Labs created 3 more monsters. How is Scum Labs still around? At the end of World Tour, Dr. Veronica was the last living Scum Labs employee. Did she rebuild the company? Who's funding them? Who would fund them after what they did last time caused the destruction of most of Earth's major cities? Did she fund it herself? If so, how? Oh, whatever. The new monsters are now looking to free the original monsters. Once again, there's a bit of an art style change, and one I really like. I prefer the more intimidating look that they gave the monsters over the more goofy designs of World Tour. Although one thing that's weird is that the human sprites are mostly the same from World Tour, but everything else looks different. There's also some weather effects like rain occasionally. The presentation is definitely improved, and it also has some pretty rocking tracks. aren't that many tracks in the game, but they're all pretty good. Although the PlayStation version has more tracks, but I like the ones kept in the N64 version more, so I don't really mind. Now, onto the gameplay, and when it comes down to it, it's not all that different from World Tour. There are differences, like the new monsters. The original 3 are locked up, so you don't have them until you free them. So before then, you have 3 new monsters. Curtis the Mouse, Ruby the Lobster, and, well, I'll get into the third one later. Just like the previous game, everyone has the same moveset, but each character has a different set of stats. One for how fast they walk, how fast they climb, and how fast they punch. Punch is the only stat that matters, so characters like Curtis and Lizzie are just annoying to play as since they punch really slowly. Each stat has 3 levels. Most characters have a level 2 punch, which is fine, but then there's the best character in the game.
Oh my! You're...
Boris, biggest, baddest of all. Ha!
One of the newcomers,
Boris.
is the only character of the 6 who has a max punch, and because of that, I always play as him. So let's go. At the start, you can choose which of the 3 original monsters you want to save, each representing a different continent. Each continent has about 25 cities, and what you do in them is exactly the same as in World Tour. Wreck it and move on. Between cities, you get this Indiana Jones style map showing your route, which I really like, especially after playing World Tour, where unless you recognized the name of the city, you had no idea what part of the world you were on. Didn't help that you could literally cross entire continents between cities, but here you know exactly where you are and how you got there. Now in the cities, the mechanics are exactly the same, so I won't go over that again. Same with your moveset. The cities tend to be bigger, with much taller buildings. In World Tour, you didn't really ever get a building that went above the screen, at least not that often. But here, there are actual skyscrapers. Look at how tall this building is. Or this one. You're going to be spending more time on buildings than World Tour, especially since they're more durable. I've noticed it takes more hits to destroy buildings than in World Tour. I actually like this. It feels like things went a bit too quickly in World Tour, and it never feels like it's taking too long. One thing they added that's the only new addition to the monster's movesets is a new purple power meter under your health. It increases by eating food. Eating people is a good way to fill it. And you can even find these purple things in buildings that will fill it all the way. When it's full, you can do a special move that is unique to each monster. Ruby can spin, damaging everything close by. Lizzie gets 3 fireballs. Ralph howls. George has a big stomp move, but if you do it on top of a building, it instantly destroys it, which is very satisfying. And then there's Curtis, who charges with his mouth open and hits every building once, but it only knocks one hole in each building. Curtis sucks. Don't play as him. He has the weakest punch and the worst special move. Unlike
Boris,
who has the single best special move in the game. He charges forward and the first building he comes in contact with is instantly destroyed. It doesn't matter how big it is, it will come down. Bam! There it goes. This is so satisfying. Look at this big building here, and it's gone. Oh, I love this. Hey, there's another building of equal size right next to it. What city am I in again? Oh. Oh no. If I haven't already convinced you that Boris is the best character, I don't know what will. Every 5 cities you destroy, you will get one of 3 bonus stages. There's also more if you play in co-op. One which is just destroying a really big building in a set time. Boris is really good at this one. One where you have to fly as far as possible without landing in water, which can be pretty difficult since it's hard to keep flapping long enough. And the last one where you just kick people. The purpose of these is if you do a good enough job, you get full health and power restores, and can get extra lives. That's right, you now have lives. If you run out of health, you lose a life, and your health regenerates. But if you lose all of them, you're booted back to the title screen and have to start from your last save. I hate live systems in any game, so I'm not fond of them being here, but it's not that hard. For one thing, you can put in a 99 life code, which I usually do, don't tell anyone. But also, there aren't nearly as many enemies attacking you all at once as in World Tour. Yeah, they really dialed back the enemies for this game. Guess they figured since it's no longer an arcade game, they don't need that arcade difficulty. Not only are there fewer enemies on screen at once, but there are less enemy types, which I'm actually okay with since they got rid of all the annoying enemies from World Tour. Who actually liked the jetpack enemies, or Ed 209, or this thing? I didn't, and I'm glad they're gone, although the tanks are still here and just as annoying here as they were in World Tour. Although there is one thing I really don't like. Sometimes the three planes will fly across the screen and drop bombs that is impossible to avoid. In World Tour, something similar would happen if you took too long, but there it would destroy the buildings, not hurt you. I think it happens if you take too long, but sometimes it feels random when it happens. But that's the only real issue I have with this game. Eventually you'll reach the city that has a trapped monster in it, and all you need to do to free them is destroy the other buildings, and then you can destroy their cage. After freeing all three of them, aliens suddenly invade. So now you just go to the other continents you haven't been and destroy more cities, but with aliens fighting you instead. There are two more enemy types during this. The alien ship, which effectively replaces the helicopters, but are more aggressive, and the walkers, which will constantly be attacking you, and they keep respawning. Luckily, they can't knock you over like the tanks, so they are still manageable. As you progress, the more and more alien buildings will appear, until eventually all of the buildings will be alien structures. I really like the designs of the alien buildings. They're pretty unique, but at some point, you'll run into Area 51 and be fighting humans for one more level. And here you rescue a giant alien monster that you can play as. Mucus is his name, and he's got pretty good stats. He has a level 3 punch just like Boris, but his special move isn't as good. He shoots his eye out and it explodes, which is pretty amusing, but not as good as some of the others. You can also get two other variants of this guy with codes. There's Nubis, who is the same but black, and the character select says he has the worst stats of any character, but actually playing as him I can say that isn't the case. He definitely has a level 3 punch. But besides that, you can unlock a purple alien who has perfect stats. If I'm not playing as Boris, I'm playing as this guy. All three aliens have the same special move, and for some reason you can only have one of them at a time. Just keep the purple one, he's the best. After saving Mucus, the aliens retreat back to space, and the monsters follow them. Wait, how did they do that? Did they jump? The moving on screen shows them running. How are they doing this? I wonder if the PlayStation version shows how they... Oh, that's how. Anyways, so now you get to go to the other planets in our solar system to destroy alien cities. Uranus totally destroyed. After that, you go to their homeworld and have a few more cities to destroy before you get to the final level, which has this thing, which I hesitate to call a boss. You just punch it a bunch after destroying the other buildings until it eventually gets destroyed. Well, that was underwhelming, but that's it. All that's left is a scene of an alien news reporter getting eaten. And that's Rampage 2 Universal Tour, the game I've played the most, and it's still my favorite. World Tour was good and all, but I feel like this one is more refined. It really isn't that different at face value, but I think it made enough improvements. But I think it's time for the series to add new things to potentially vary up the game. The series is constantly accused of being incredibly repetitive and boring, and while I really enjoy Universal Tour, there's only so many times you can make a sequel with mostly small changes before it stops being interesting. The next game of the series did add a couple new things to change up the game. Oh man, this game. The next Rampage game came out a year later. It's a direct sequel to Universal Tour, but this one is exclusive to the PS1. It's Rampage Through Time, and it's kinda... Okay, no more beating around the bush. Rampage Through Time sucks. It's really bad. It's no joke one of the worst games I've ever played. I'm being serious here. Let's not waste any time and just get it over with. So the first thing I did was check the controls, since I played the last two games on N64 and this is on PlayStation. And I noticed already the button layouts are terrible. They give you a bunch of layouts to choose from, but none of them feel right. The ideal layout for me would be X jumps, square punches, circle kicks, and triangle does a special move. Well, they have every combination but that. So I had X kicks and circle jumps, which was really awkward and I never really got used to it. Okay, so we're off to a bad start, but let's just begin. So on the character select, it appears every monster is unlocked from the start, which I guess is good, although I do like being able to unlock characters. Every character from Universal Tour is here, excluding the green and black aliens. It's just the purple one, which I'm fine with. And they use the same sprites, which I like those sprites, but Universal Tour changed the look of everyone from World Tour, so it seems lazy that they didn't change anything here. There's also a new boar monster named Harley, and one annoyance here is that it doesn't tell you their stats. The previous monsters have the same stats as before, including the purple guy here, which is weird that a character with perfect stats is unlocked from the start, but if you didn't know that, then you wouldn't know the difference. And since Harley is new, I don't know what his stats are. But whatever, might as well test him out. Once you picked a character, the opening cutscene starts. This is one of the most annoying and awkward cutscenes I've ever seen. It's similar to the cutscene in the PlayStation version of Universal Tour, but so much worse. The jokes are not funny, and they drag them on for as long as possible. Was this necessary? And even when this guy is actually able to talk, he does so very slowly.
Well, that's a relief. For if the monsters were to enter the time portal, who knows at which moment in history their devastation would fall.
It's just annoying. And this scene is nearly 5 minutes long. You don't need 5 minutes to explain this game's setup. So basically Scumlabs, which for some reason still exists after their mistake caused the destruction of nearly the entire planet, twice, who is funding them? Who would fund them after this? You'd think at the very least they'd get sued to hell. Anyways, they apparently made a time machine. What and why? So not only are they still a company, but now they have a time machine? Why did they make a time machine? Why does a toxic waste recycling company have a private military, giant robots, a moon base, a shrink ray, and now a goddamn time machine? Whatever, who cares? The monster entered the time machine, and that's all that matters. Let's just start. After that train wreck, you were shown which time period you're going to. Every time you start the game new, the level you go to is randomized. So in the game, nothing really has changed. Your moveset is identical, and everyone has the same special move from the last game. Harley's is farting. Lovely. Now undoubtedly, you may have noticed that there are 3 monsters here. Did I finally play one of these games with other people? No. No, I didn't. Those aren't other players. They are AI controlled. For some godforsaken reason, they thought it would be fun to have 2 AI controlled monsters with you at all times. There's no way to play without them. This is one of 2 things that makes this game so bad. Their AI is horrible. Sure, they'll attack the buildings sometimes, but most of the time they just get in the way, as well as actively attack you. So I didn't talk much about co-op in the other games, but you share one screen. So you can't make the screen move unless everyone goes in that direction. It's the same thing here, and because their AI is this bad, they'll often not go where you want to go. They'll also make it really difficult to get to the top of taller buildings. But look at this. I just want to get to the top. Just let me get to the top. Please, just let me go up. This is really irritating. They won't follow you. They get in the way. They can make you get stuck. And did I mention they will constantly attack each other and you? I don't even care about the variety of different themes due to the time travel plot, which I normally would appreciate, or the music, or anything that could be any good, because the core gameplay is frustratingly annoying. It's tedious, it's irritating. You know, I kinda like the concept of AI-controlled ally monsters helping you out, but this is not how you do it. The other monsters are the biggest obstacle in the game. They're not your allies, they're your enemy. An enemy you can't get rid of. This feels like something the developers would put in to punish pirates. Like in Serious Sam, there was this monster that you can't kill that hunts you down the entire game. That is what this feels like. Even if you manage to get to the top of a building, they'll just punch you right off. Destroying a building, they'll knock you off of it. Just walking to the next building, have a kick in the balls. They add nothing good to the game. All they do is suck away the fun of Rampage. Want to have fun? Fuck you. You can't have any. I can't emphasize enough how much this ruins the game. But since you literally can't die, you can just beat your head against a wall until eventually you finish the game, right? Except, no you can't, because each era has a few normal stages before forcing you into a minigame. Each era has its own unique minigame, and here's what I think of them.
It's awful.
It's all fucking awful! It's all of it, and every single one of them sucks!
These minigames are horrible. They're not fun, they're poorly controlled, and once again, you're competing with the other monsters. Most of them are reliant on luck, and if you lose, when you lose, you get a game over, and are sent back to the title screen. This is the second thing that ruins this game. Why are these here, and why is this the thing tied to the failure state? You shouldn't be punished because of minigame. You wanted to have minigames? Make it a separate mode. Don't force it in the main game and make you restart if you lose. You only get the option to save after beating a minigame, so you won't ever get a chance to just redo it right away before replaying the last few levels. Which would be fine if it weren't for, you know... And if you lose the first one, you need to restart from the beginning. Luckily you can skip the cutscene, but the area you go to is randomized so you couldn't even try the same minigame again. This is unbearable. The city levels are irritating to play because of the broken AI, and the minigames are terribly designed and send you back if you fail them. And you will fail them. Why? Why did they do this? They ruined the game with this, and even if they were removed, this would still be just an average Rampage game since the building layouts are half-assed. Don't think I didn't notice the constant reusing of this set of buildings. Also, the enemies are more annoying, although harder to notice because of, you know... And then there's enemies like the bombers and even tanks that will constantly respawn. They didn't do that in the last game, why here? Not to mention destroying tanks is much more of a pain in the ass thanks to, you know... No, that's it. I'm done. I quit. I'm not gonna put up with this. Normally, I don't like reviewing a game I haven't beaten, but it's a good thing this isn't a review. Everything is made to be annoying, and I don't care enough to put myself through this. It's not like it's gonna improve. It's a Rampage game. It's gonna be the same thing the entire time. I don't need to show everything. Well, I'll at least show you the other modes. There's also tournament mode, which is the same thing, but you can choose which level you want, and the goal is to get more points than the other players. It's also the only way you can play with other people, so for the main game, you need the AI with you. And then there's challenge mode, which is the mini-games. No thanks. Okay, I'll put in a code to the final boss, and oh, now the AI are gone. Why did you have to put up with them the entire time, but now get rid of them? Well, the boss is annoying anyways, and since it's technically classified as a minigame, if you lose all your health, it's game over. No thanks. That's it. I'm done with this abomination. I'm never touching it again. Rampage Through Time is garbage. Next game. Now this is getting goddamn ridiculous. Okay, before the next real game, let's take a small detour. For some reason, there's a Rampage puzzle game on the GBA. Rampage Puzzle Tech. Rampage... Puzzle Attack. You can't make this up. Well, why does this exist? Who looked at Rampage and thought it would work as a puzzle game? This game doesn't even have anything to do with Rampage. It's just some puzzle game with Rampage characters slapped on. Like Rampage was such a big deal you could start selling anything with its name on it. Did they really think Rampage was a good enough series to make a spin-off of? 'Cause it's not, and a Rampage puzzle game seems counterintuitive, don't you think? Rampage is just dumb, mindless fun. While puzzle games require at least some thought. I didn't even know about this game until I looked up the series on Wikipedia. Just why? I'm only mentioning it because it is technically part of the series, but that's about all I'll say about it. At this point, Rampage took a bit of a break. It was becoming a yearly series, but now we wouldn't be getting a new one until 2006. Originally for the GameCube and PlayStation 2, but later that same year for the Wii, the final game in the series is Rampage Total Destruction. Now I got the Wii version close to around when it came out. Played it for a few minutes and haven't touched it since. I was kind of dreading getting to this game, but after Rampage Through Time, I doubt it could possibly be worse. Before I get into the game, there's a bonus content menu that has the original arcade game in it. It's how I was able to record it. It also has a World Tour. I guess I didn't need to borrow my friend's copy in N64 then. But where's Universal Tour? That was the best one. Oh, is that the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy I see? I love that show. Yeah, the Wii version has a trailer for a Billy and Mandy game. I'm sure it's not terrible like all the other licensed games. Alright, so the game starts with a cutscene that actually doesn't make me want to jump off a cliff, and it seems that this game is another reboot since it doesn't follow the story of the last 3 games. So in this game, Scum Labs makes soda. Okay, who would buy soda from a company called Scum Labs? Especially since the soda is called Scum Soda. Yeah, that sounds good. Almost as good as a bottle of sewer water. I'm not sure what they put in that soda, but it turns this guy into a giant hand. So now there's a board meeting explaining the situation, and it actually was kind of funny at points.
How many people had a negative reaction?
Well, we're still working the numbers on that one, Mr. Z, but I would say, roughly speaking, 40.
I see. 40. And how many people tried Scum Soda?
40.
So yeah, there are 40 monsters running around because of defective soda, and that's all the setup I need, so let's just go already. Visually, well, it's an early third-party Wii game, what do you expect? Yeah, it doesn't look very good. I much prefer the art styles of Universal Tour and even World Tour. The designs of the monsters aren't as appealing. Oh god, what did they do to Ruby? The music is fine, okay to listen to, but pretty forgettable. And now for the actual game. You have a few monsters unlocked at the start, including all the classics, George, Lizzie, Ralph, Ruby, and
Maurice,
but no Curtis for some reason. Good. There's also a few new monsters here, but let's not start listing everyone since that would take some time. The goal as always is to destroy all of the buildings, but there are some differences. It seems to have reverted to how the original game laid out cities. You have a small block to destroy with significantly less buildings, and you can't loop around by going in one direction. The screen is also zoomed in more, so it can be difficult to see everything when there are bigger buildings. So basically, everything about this game is done worse than the previous games, not including Rampage at the time. That game is still the worst. There are two main issues with this game. One, this is technically a 3D game, so you can move in any direction, but this brings up a bunch of problems. The second issue, which ties into the first, are the controls. You move a lot slower than previous games, and clinging on buildings is a bit more awkward because it's in 3D. Before you just got next to a building and push up. Now it automatically clings to the building after rubbing against it, but only sometimes. It seems you can't climb smaller buildings. You can now climb on the front of buildings, which is neat, but now you have to worry about the position of your hand so you can hit in the right spot. And it can get hard to get in the right position to hit or grab in the area you want, both on the front and the side of the building. So by default, you could do a standard punch with a push of a button, but because this game is now 3D, you can't aim where you want to punch anymore. So if you want to attack a vehicle or eat something on the ground, it requires a different move. And unfortunately, the normal punch is the only move that doesn't require motion controls. Yes, this is an early Wii game, which means it forces motion controls on you. And even though this game was also on GameCube, you can't use a GameCube controller. So if you shake the Wiimote to the side, you will grab something on the ground. On a building, shaking to the side will make you do a stronger punch. Shaking downward will make you do a ground slam, and on a building, it's the kick. Since there are two separate actions tied to shaking the Wiimote, you will frequently be performing the wrong move. I can't count how many times I tried to do a slam, but it instead did the grab. This wouldn't be a problem if I had buttons to work with, but this is a classic example of how forced motion controls get in the way. Besides the difference in control and presentation, you're still doing the same thing here as all of the other games, destroying buildings, then move on to the next set of buildings. Unlike in World Tour or Universal Tour, there aren't many cities you go to, only about 8, but each city is divided up into a bunch of blocks, each block being a different level. I prefer the old style because it felt like we were actually destroying the world, but aside from that, destroying buildings in this game is just tedious. It takes more than one punch to knock a hole in a building, which just slows down the pace, and the pace was already slower because you're not as mobile. Buildings take a lot more punishment than before, probably because you can climb and attack from the front, but it just takes a while to destroy some of these buildings, and your standard punch is not up to the task. Unfortunately, the motion control attacks are more effective at destroying buildings than the standard punch, so you better get waggly. Although even then it can feel like it takes a lot. The slam move essentially replaces the downward punch in the previous games, but it's so much slower, so it isn't nearly as useful. The kick can no longer completely destroy an entire floor, and you can't flatten buildings by jumping on them. All of the satisfaction of destroying buildings has been taken away. You can find power-ups in buildings like increased speed and instant rampage, which increases power, I think, but that doesn't really help. Each block has a challenge you can complete for extra points, but in some cases it can give you extra moves like a charge punch, which becomes the most effective way to destroy buildings. There are a couple problems with this. The challenges can comprise of things like eat this many of this specific type of person, or destroy this many of this thing, stuff like that. But the most common challenge is to eat a certain amount of things found inside of buildings, and those are completely up to luck if you can find them before destroying the building. Another problem is that the new abilities you get only apply to the monster you're currently playing as and not any of the others. You can now switch monsters after every block, but why wouldn't you just stick to the one that already has all the extra moves? Aside from different stats, there is no difference in moveset between all the monsters. That would be fine, except there are a lot more monsters here than in previous games. The intro didn't lie. There are 40 monsters you can play as. You think that's enough? Now normally I would like having a high amount of playable characters, but each one needs to unlock these moves. This isn't Dynasty Warriors, where each character has a different moveset, which makes you want to play as them all to see which one you like the most, and to unlock their weapons. Every monster plays the same, all 40 of them, and the only point in playing as different monsters is to unlock more monsters. To unlock monsters, you simply find them in a building, specific levels, but you have to be playing as a specific monster to find them. That is just stupid. There is no indication where a monster could be or which monster you need to use. The only way you'll be able to find them without a guide is to literally replay the game with every single monster until you eventually find them all. No thanks, I'll just use a code to unlock them. One thing to note is that the Wii version has 10 more monsters than the GameCube and PS2 versions, and among those are Ruby and
Maurice,
So pick your poison, not having Boris or motion controls. Now while you're destroying everything, you have the same kinds of enemies from previous games, people with guns, helicopters, and tanks. Oh, and thanks to the game being 3D, attacking helicopters is more annoying because you can't just punch up. You need to waggle in midair to do this spin attack. Some parts can get tough later on, and you have lives again. It works like it did in Universal Tour, but instead of booting you to the title screen, you just redo the block you were on. There are also bosses that are just annoying and better off being ignored since they aren't required to beat the level. You still get health items from buildings as well as hazards, but the hazards are really annoying here because, for one, it's harder to notice them, especially if you are on the front of a building, and I swear there's no way of avoiding the fire or water. You can still eat people to regain health, but every time you eat someone, you burp. If you eat a lot of people, this is what you will constantly be hearing. Honestly, this game is just tedious. It isn't fun, mostly because of the controls, and my arm is starting to hurt from waggling the Wiimote so much, so I'm gonna end it here. There isn't much to say, really. It's a Rampage game, so it's gonna be more of the same at the end. It isn't awful, but there are better Rampage games. There's also worse, but there are better. Perhaps it would be more enjoyable on GameCube or PS2, but that's not the version I have, and frankly, I don't think it'll make a huge enough difference to make this good. And that is every Rampage game. The series died off after Total Destruction, at least until the movie became a thing. And while I still really enjoy Universal Tour, it's probably for the better that it's dead. Unless they really did something different, I don't see how the series could go on with the same structure. This isn't a high-quality, pristine series. Don't expect something grand. It's just dumb, mindless, repetitive fun. It's a good stress reliever, but that's about it. I think if there were ever going to be a new game, it would need to have better level design than just a flat area with buildings, and also make each monster play differently. I mentioned Dynasty Warriors a few times, but that series does a better job, or at least 8 did. Every character played differently, and each level had some actual level design and had you doing different things each time, so while it still is repetitive, it didn't feel like it was. But as it is, out of all the games, the only ones I can recommend are World Tour and Universal Tour. They're not for everyone and require a certain mindset to enjoy, but they are the best this series has to offer. Don't touch Rampage Through Time though, that game is a steaming dumpster fire. I still can't believe they made a movie out of this series, of all things. But as I said at the beginning, I guess I would rather they take a series no one cares about and make it into a movie than to take a series that's actually really good and has a good story and then ruin it. I'm glad the Sly Cooper movie seems to be cancelled, but anyways, as baffled as I am that the Rampage movie actually exists, I might just see it anyways. Probably not in theaters, but eventually. It is in theaters right now, and it's really annoying that it's now not the original release date of 4/20. Now I can't make any weed jokes. Ah well, that's all I have to say. I'll see you next time.
Ooga booga booga! Ow! What did I do?
Hey, if you're still watching this, I'm guessing you might have actually liked it or care about my videos. So you might be interested to hear that I made a public Discord server. One thing that bothers me about a lot of YouTubers is when they don't even try to interact with their audience. I like talking to people who comment on my videos, even the negative ones, and I think that having a Discord server could help make interacting with you guys easier. I've joined a few other servers, but I've never been the center of one, so hopefully this works out well. I think I'm small enough where this server won't be a complete disaster. We'll see what happens. But if you're interested, the link is in the description. I'll see you there.